So last week we did what I often call media literacy, or simply how to read the news at any level. And this week we're going to do cultural literacy. It's something we're going to continually do. We've done in the past. We're just giving it an actual title. And the idea is to present to you something that is not just in Hebrew, but is reflective of Israeli society, and frankly, something that native Israelis or someone who grew up in Israel might take for granted that those of us who are making Aliyah may not know anything about. And so every time we do this, it's going to be a different contribution or a different understanding of Israel through some piece of culture. A lot of it's going to be music because I happen to really like Israeli music, and I think that's very reflective. It could be a piece of TV or movie. It could also be suggestions from you. But the idea is to understand how many of us learn languages, which is the context in which it's used. And what better way than showing you some of Israeli culture and society? And today we're going to do it by something that actually took place just last week, but also is linked to many, many years in the past. So for those of you who are either up on your social media or very much engaged with your own Hebrew learning wherever you are, you may know that last week was the birth date of Eliezer ben Yehuda. Eliezer ben Yehuda is credited as being the father of modern Hebrew, the guy who really spearheaded the successful attempt to turn Hebrew from a liturgical language that was very barely used in everyday situations to an everyday language. It's in fact one of the very few examples in history of a language not necessarily being extinct, but certainly being brought back into everyday use. Think of the context in which Hebrew was used 200 years ago, right? It was used in prayer and religious affairs. And every once in a while, if Jews from various communities need to speak to each other and they didn't have another common language with each other, they would try to adopt Hebrew. But if your context is all in is religious, you may not know scientific words or words about trading, which is often the case of why you needed to speak Hebrew between different Jewish communities. Those words didn't exist, right? We're going to talk about a lot of those modern words in coming lessons ahead. But on Eliezer ben Yehuda's birthday, we celebrate International Day of Hebrew, or at least here in Israel, it's called International Day of Hebrew. And every year, the Academy of the Hebrew Language, which is the official body that's in charge of standardizing modern Hebrew, as well as coming up with new words, but also standardizing grammar and how we use the language, has a word of the year. You may be familiar with this in English. Oxford Dictionary does this. A whole bunch of other languages do a word of the year. And that's meant to symbolize or encapsulate everything that happened in that year. So this year's Milat Hashana, which is how we say word of the year, is, let me pull it up. This is from the Academy of the Hebrew Languages website. So the winner of this year, Milat Hashana Tafshin Pei Vav, right? Because it's, even though we're celebrating this at the beginning of January, this is very much about the Hebrew year because we're talking about the Hebrew language, right? The winner this year is this word in the middle, Habayta. First off, let's talk about the runner-ups. So the way this works basically is people are allowed to submit their suggestions, and then they're allowed to vote. Common public are allowed to vote. And the winner received more than a quarter of the total votes. Coming in second place is Bina Malachutit. If you can't figure that out from the little logo that's attached to it, that means artificial intelligence in Hebrew. Bina is intelligence, Malachutit, artificial, and Tikva, bottom right, hope. But our word is Habayta. Now, we've talked about the word Habayta before, and we're going to keep talking about it because it's a really important word in Israeli society and in the Hebrew language. Habayta is not house, okay? And it's not even home. And that's something we're going to talk about today. So why is this word the word? Well, first off, it obviously has to do with the last year, right? Because the word is supposed to define the current state we're in. Think about those of you who are into art, the color of the year, for example. that's also put out there, but also the word of the year, right? And this word is meant to encapsulate what many of us are talking about. And this word Habayta obviously has a lot of significance with regards to the return of the kidnapped, although we're still waiting for one to come back. It has to do with those who were displaced on October 7th coming home or trying to get home, as well as all the soldiers um, in reserve duty, whether alive or not, coming home as well, right? Habayta. What does Habayta mean? So to understand the word Habayta, we need to look at a little bit of grammar before I share with you the cultural piece, because if this wasn't cultural enough, we got a lot more going. So, Habayta. Habayta comes from the word bite, and we'll get to the word bite in a second, right? Habayta is best translated as homeward. Okay, homeward. It's also used in modern Hebrew. If you scream Habayta at someone, it means go home or get lost. There's a classic song by Salit Haddad, a very famous singer musician here in Israel at the beginning of the 2000s, and the song's title is Yalla Lech Habayta Moti. Yalla, go home, Moti, right? So it also means get lost, but it also means homeward, as in another song title, but also a very common thing to say, Ani chozer habayta. Okay? Ani chozer habayta means I'm coming home. Literally, I'm returning home. Chozer is return. Ani chozer habayta, I'm coming home. You can also say in modern Hebrew, by the way, Ani chozer labayt sheli. So, of course, a whole bunch of hands are coming up, and I've gotten these questions before. But wait a minute, Jay. If I can say Ani chozer labayt sheli, which is makes more sense to my English ears or my non-Hebrew speaking ears, right? Because that translates to I am returning to my home. Ani, I, chozer, returning. Labayt, to the house. Sheli, of mine, i.e., my house. That makes a lot of sense. So, what is this Ani chozer habayta? Hebrew, like many languages, has a love-hate affair with what we call case endings. Okay, case endings. Case endings are those of you who've ever studied um, uh, languages like Latin or German or Arabic or Russian, you probably are more familiar with case endings. These are endings that we put at the ends of words that change depending on what is the status of the word. It's not just is it the subject or the object, it's also about what kind of subject and what kind of object it is. English more or less has thrown them all out. We still use them, you just don't know that you are using them because we don't teach them. Because we don't have the same structure. Those of you who, for example, have ever dabbled in Latin, you know these and they drive you nuts because you know that a single noun can have dozens and dozens of declensions or conjugations based on what case it is. English and Hebrew have really gotten rid of a lot of them with some notable exceptions. Habayta is one of those exceptions. Habayta is what we call the allative case. The allative case is all about direction. In Hebrew, we call it Hey Hamegama. And it's called Hey Hamegama because we add a Hey to the end of words to indicate direction towards something. And that's why Habayta is best translated not home, homeward, right? Because Ani Chozer Habayta, I'm coming home, or I'm going home, or I'm returning home. But the idea is it's homeward in the direction of home. And if you think that that's the only word we actually have a lot of these in Hebrew. Kadima. Kadima comes from the root that gives us words like lehit kadem, to become advanced. So kadima is the direction of forward. Listen to that word, forward. Listen to the word homeward. That word at the end, right, short for toward in English, indicates a direction. Just like the opposite of kadima, me'achora, backward or going back. Or hachutza. Hachutza is another way of saying habayta to someone in terms of getting out. It comes from the word chutz, out or outside. Hachutza means outside, in the direction of out. Those of you who have dogs or have friends who have dogs, and you tell your dog to lie down, what do you say? Arza. Arza from the word eretz, right? Land, ground. Arza, go in the direction of the ground, i.e., lie down. Okay. And we have a whole bunch of other words. Those of you who are familiar with either places in Israel or Jewish liturgy, you know words like negba. Negba is towards the Negev. Negev words, if you want to think about it in a literal sense, right? Negev words. Okay. Negba. We have a whole bunch of other ones. Okay. Um, that we do this. For example, in very poetic terms, we use this a lot. There is for example, both in poetry, but also in the Tanakh, right? In the Bible, we have words like ha'ira, towards the city, Mitzrayma, towards Egypt. In modern Hebrew, you will hear people say Tel Aviva, towards Tel Aviv. Or even there's a song about going to Eilat, and it's Eilata, right? You've heard that before. Some of you may live or have friends who live in Efrat, and you've also heard the name of the town being Ephrata, right? Same idea, towards Efrat. Okay, so that hey is not just any random hey. It's what we call hey hamegama in Hebrew, or it indicates a case ending called allative case. If case endings freak you out, don't worry. We don't have it very often in Hebrew. But this is a great example of how we can pack a whole lot of meaning in one word. And what's also important, because the precedent of this hey megama is in the Bible. To this day, when the Academy of the Hebrew Language is standardizing modern Hebrew, it draws on the language of both the Bible and of the early Talmudic period as the cornerstones or the standards for what modern Hebrew should have. So if it was included in those books, then it usually is accepted in modern Hebrew. It may have evolved over the years. But for example, this hey megama, this ending that indicates towards, is very much there. Okay. Habayta means homeward. You can translate it as home, but it really means homeward. If we're going to get fancy with our case endings, you know the regular word bite. Bite is what we would, the fancy term is the nominative clause. I have a terrible time reading these case endings because, again, maybe it's psychological. I don't want to learn them. You don't need to learn them either. This simply means the subject of the sentence, right? Bite. Habayit sheli rik. My house is empty. Um, Habayit sheli kar. My house is cold. Okay, because we have a storm coming in right now, for example, right? Bite. And then we have a third case ending that we've talked about here before. We just didn't call it a case ending, but it's an important one nonetheless, and it's called the genitive. The genitive is what we would also call the construct case, or in Hebrew, smichut. And this is the word bait, right? A lot of you have written to me over the years or written in the comments, wait a minute, Jay, habaita, bait, bait, what's the difference? Well, look at the difference in the English. Habaita means homeward. Bait simply means house, a house. It can be any house, your house, their house, doesn't matter. But bait is the house of. Think of all the times you've heard the word bait before and how it's translated into English, right? It's translated two ways, either literally, for example, Beit Knesset, the house of Knesset, assembly, or it's translated like it should be as one morpheme, as one thought. Beit Knesset, synagogue, right? The genitive case is how we create compound words. Literally half of the Hebrew dictionary are compound words. For example, Beit Knesset, Beit Sefer, the house of a book or the book. Beit Sefer is a school, so forth, right? Beit Almin, house of eternity, a cemetery. Okay, so three different cases. You probably didn't even know about case endings. If you did, congratulations, you now that they exist in Hebrew. For all of you who don't know what that is, erase it from your heads. Just know that there is an important difference between these words, and you are going to hear them again and again. Certainly when it comes to things like compound nouns, like why is it bait and not bite? We have to change it to indicate, right, that the meaning of the word is changed. It is no longer house. It is the house of. Just like Habayta is no longer the house, it is homeward. That's an important difference that you can't just skip over. If you don't like Habayta, as you see here, you can say in modern Hebrew, Ani chozer labayit sheli. And that is perfectly all right. Is it as poetic? Is it as 5,000 years old as Ani chozer labayta? No. But it is no less acceptable in modern Hebrew. Okay? So now that we put that there, we're going to talk about why this word Habayta is even more poignant this year. And we talked about it obviously in the context of the Chatufim, the kidnapped coming home, and one still remaining to come home, soldiers coming home, those who were displaced on October 7th coming home, right? That is a major message of the past year, and hence the reason why it was chosen. Also, for a long period now, each of the assemblies or rallies to release the kidnapped was has included a song called Habayta. And the song has a really interesting story that also gets into some controversy in Israeli society, which is important to know. But this song is defined the last year. And frankly, I would say about the last 40 plus years of Israeli wars and politics. Why? This song, Habayta, well, if I play it, you'll almost immediately place where it comes from culture-wise. So actually, I'm going to start that before we listen to the words. I'm going to read the words really fast in Hebrew. I'm going to come back to them. Don't worry. I want you to listen to the original version of it. And then we're going to talk about the meaning of the words a little bit. So the meaning of here's the words. Od shana chalfa, and you see here the English is on the left. We'll come back to the English in a little bit. Od shana chalfa, od shana trufa. Asavim shotim alu, bashvil uvaggan. Ruach neenach, et hatris patach, umake bakir hayashan, kemo kore. Habayta, habayta, ba'a et lachzor. Minhe harim misdot zarim, misadot zarim, hayom do'ech ve'en siman. Habayta, habayta, terem redet or, לילות קרים, לילות מרים, קרבים עכשיו לכאן. עד עלות השחר, מתפללת לשלומך. שבויה באזיקי פחדים, אני שומעת צעדים. הביתה, הביתה, כי עוד לא ניתן, כל מה שהובטח לנו מזמן. Okay. The song is about coming home, but it has a specific context. I want you to listen to the music first. We're going to listen to the original version, and then we're going to listen to an updated version. I want you to listen to the music. This is sung by Yardena Arazi in an accompaniment. Yardena Arazi, by the way, is a female. Those of you who have issues with female musicians, you do you. Yardena Arazi was a very, very popular musician and singer in the 80s and 90s. We've actually covered some of her songs before. Why this song is so important has to do with the context in which the song is sung. So first we're going to listen to the original version, and we're going to come back to the lyrics to understand why this song is so important. Okay, there we go.
עוד שנה חלפה, עוד שנה תרופה, עשבים שוטים עלו בשביל ובגן, רוח נאנח, את התריס פתח, ומכה בקיר הישן, כמו קורא הביתה, הביתה, באה עת לחזור מן הערים משדות זרים, היום דועך ואין סימן. הביתה, הביתה, טרם רדת אור, לילות קרים, לילות מרים, קריבים עכשיו לך, עד צעדים, אני שומעת צעדים. הביתה, הביתה, כי עוד לא ניתן כל מה שהובטח לנו מזמן. עוד שנה חלפה, עוד שנה תרופה, עשבים שוטים עלו בשביל ובגר, רוח נאנח את התריס פתח ומכה בקיר הישן כמו קורא. הביתה, הביתה, באה עת לחזור מן ההרים משדות זרים, היום דועך ואין סימן. הביתה, הביתה, טרם רדת עוד, לילות קרים, לילות מרים, קריבים עכשיו לך. עד עלות השחר מתפללת לשלומך, שבויה באזיקי פחדים, אני שומעת צעדים. הביתה, הביתה, כי עוד לא ניתן כל מה שהובטח לנו מזמן. השחר מתפללת לשלומך, שבויה באזיקי פחדים, אני שומעת צעדים. הביתה, הביתה, כי עוד לא ניתן כל מה שהובטח לנו מזמן.
Okay, pause it there. So think about what you heard in that song, right? Think about the sound of it. You didn't necessarily understand the Hebrew. Good, because we're going to go over it. How they were dressed, what the music sounded like. Could you place it? Probably could if you have some understanding of music in general, not necessarily of Israeli music, right? Probably late 70s, early 80s, right? That would sound right. You got the feathered hair, you had the outfits, you had the synthesizer sound, the very sort of predictable pop music ballad sound to it, right? So this song is from the early 80s, and the story goes like this. Yardena Arazi was a really popular musician, a singer. Lots of pop hits, very popular in the late 70s and 80s. And like many Israeli musicians, she was on tour to visit soldiers in the field. Now, what war was there in the early 1980s? First Lebanon War. After soldiers being entertained by musicians, not just foreign international tour singers like Leonard Cohen during the Yom Kippur War, but also the army's own entertainment troops. Many of those songs you probably know. Yardena Ghazi was even one of those. She performs in southern Lebanon in the early 80s. She's the only or the first female singer to do so. And those of you who know the story of the First Lebanon War, it was a very controversial war. It was after years and years of shelling by PLO terrorists from southern Lebanon into northern Israel, with lots of various terrorist attacks. And Menachem Begin, the prime minister at the time, orders the war. And it was very controversial because it was thought that this is the first time Israel is choosing to fight a war rather than defending itself or having a war imposed on it. It's certainly a form of defense, but it was a chosen war. And that southern Lebanon, of all places, is not the easiest place to fight. We know that ever since Second Lebanon War and certainly since October 7th. It's a very dangerous place, very hilly, lots of valleys, lots of places to hide. And it was a very contentious war to fight. Yaldena Ghazi goes to perform for the troops. She herself is nearly wounded. She is performing in or near or staying near a villa that ended up being booby trapped. She escaped unharmed, came back to Israel, relayed the story to her publicist. Her publicist then got in touch with one of the biggest songwriters at the time in Israel, and still to this day, one of the most important songwriters in Israeli history, Ehud Manol. We've talked about his songs before. We'll continue talking about his songs. They are incredibly important in Israeli music and thus in Israeli society. And he pens the words, and his colleague, Yair Klingel, comes up with the music. And so let's look at the words and keep in mind the music that you heard and then the version we're going to hear shortly. And what do you think this song is talking about? Od shana khalfa, another year has passed. Od shana trufa, another year torn apart, not torn apart. You can think of Od Shana Tufa as a terrible year, a year ripped to shreds, right? Asavim shotim, alu bashvil uvagan. Weeds, asavim shotim. That's how you say weeds in Hebrew. Alu bashvil uvagan. Using the verb la'alot to arise, like aliyah, right? To go up, meaning coming up, creeping up in the path and in the garden. Okay. What the path in the garden is, artistic license, you can decide. Ruach ne'enach, a sighing wind. Ne'enach is to sigh. Okay. Etatris patach has opened the shutters. Okay. Umakeh bakir hayashan and bangs against the old wall. This could be a house. This could also be hakir hayashan. Is that an allusion to hakotel, right? Kil is the word for wall. It is we have several different words for wall in Hebrew. One of them is kil, another one is kotel. So are they talking about this wind, this sighing wind, right? Think about when you sigh, what that means in terms of your own emotions, and it's hitting against the old wall. The old wall could be the Western Wall in Yerushalayim, right? The last remaining part of the large encampment on which the temple stood. Kmo kore, as if calling out. Habayta, habayta, come home, or come homeward, homeward, right? The wind is calling out, come home, habayta. Ba et lachzor, the time has come to come home. Or the time has come to return. Lachzor means to return. Min heharim mistot zarim, from the mountains, from the foreign fields. Hayom do'ech ve'en siman, the day is fading and there is no sign. Right? Think about who she is talking about. This wind is calling out to, or she herself is calling out to come home. Right? The story I just told you about the origin of this and where are they coming from? Min heharim misdot zarim, the mountainous um, foreign field and mountains and foreign fields of southern Lebanon. Right? Come home. Habayta, habayta, come home. Terem redet or, before the light goes out. Leilot karim, leilot marim. Leilot karim, cold nights. Leilot marim, bitter nights. Krevim achshav lechan. Right? Cold, bitter nights are slowly approaching here. What are those cold, bitter nights? That could be doom. That could be sadness. That could be grief. Whatever it may be, it could literally be cold, bitter nights, as many soldiers faced when fighting, right? But the idea that it's approaching, the light is fading, and soon are coming the cold and bitter nights. Ad halota shachar, until the dawn breaks. Mitpalelet lishlomcha. I'm praying for your well-being, and it's specifically mitpalelet. It's a female saying, "I'm praying for your well-being." Okay. Shvuya ba'azikei pchadim. Shvuya, many of you know this word from the past 2.5 years. Shavui is someone who's captive, a captive of war. So captive, someone who is captive. She is talking about that she is captive because it's shvuya, female. Ba'azikei pchadim. Azikim are handcuffs or chains. Ba'azikei, what kind of azikei? Think of our uh, genitive case here, by the way. Bazike pradim, in the chains of fear. I'm captive or I'm caught in the chains of fear. Ani shomat tzadim. I hear footsteps. Now, again, some context, because what do you mean I hear footsteps? What do you mean light is coming in the old wall? Ani shomat tzadim, right? She is mitpalelet lishlomcha. She's praying for your well-being, the soldier in the field, right? Ani shomat tzadim. I hear footsteps. The footsteps could be an allusion. Again, artistic license here. Could be an allusion to the fact that when a soldier falls in battle in Israel, the protocol is for two officers to come to the home of the family in which that soldier is from and to say to them in person what has happened. Right? So, ani shomat sadim, I can hear the officers outside walking from house to house, right? Making that announcement. So it's a very uh, impending doom that she's talking about here. And why she's calling out Habayta, Habayta, come home already. Habayta, Habayta, kio od lo nitan, kol ma shehuftach lanu mizman. Come home, ki od lo nitan, because it has not yet been given all that was promised to us long ago. What was promised to us? That I would say also leave up to your own artistic imagination. But if you listen to the song, on the one hand, it sounds very um, classic ballad, classic pop ballad. Now there's a little bit of more Israeli and Jewish imagery in this. It's not just because it's sung in Hebrew that's the case, but there's a little bit more here. Kol ma shehuftach lanu mizman, all that was promised to us long ago. What is that promise? That's not just for soldiers to come back. There's something more behind that. And if you listen to how she sang this line, she really hit high notes and she dragged out the notes. Kol ma shehuftach lanu mizman. She's really emphasizing something that was promised to us long ago. Okay, this song was understood to be a protest song even though its lyrics, it's not quite clear because everyone wants their soldier home. There are lots of songs in the Israeli canon that are about soldiers coming home, right? This song, though, felt like a protest song because we're facing the first war that many people are saying, wait a minute, do we really need to fight this war? And we're saying, come home, after she's had her own personal traumatic experience in southern Lebanon. And this song, on the one hand, was super controversial, super controversial. People refused to play it on the radio. Some radio stations refused to play it. Some people boycotted it altogether. And yet it was in the top hits for 13 weeks straight. And not only that, this song for years on end has been the song that's played at rallies when there have been kidnapped soldiers. This song was made popular again when Gilad Shalit and Goldwasser and Eldad Regev were kidnapped. This song was popularized again and again in the last 20 plus years during those cases and was sung or performed or played at those rallies. And most recently, nearly every week at the weekly rally in Tel Aviv at Kikar Chatufim and throughout the country, this song was played. Also around the world, this song was played. And it was part of a concert called Concert Moledet, the Homeland concert, to raise awareness of the those still kidnapped in the early months of the war. So we're going to watch a new version of it that was put out in the last 2 years. Some of you may already know this version. It's over 10 million views on YouTube alone. It's a different version. It's the same tune, it's the same words, but it's a very different appearance than what you just saw from the early 80s Israeli television music video, right? So I want you to both think about what are the differences in what you see on the screen, the sound that's different, We'll talk a little bit about it, and the rest we're going to talk about on Wednesday's class in Cafe Oleh Conversation, which I'll talk about right after the clip. So let me pull it up. So a couple things with that version, right? First off, it's performed in the famous amphitheater in Caesarea, thousands of performers. That arrangement was copied throughout the world, by the way, by hundreds of musicians also doing a huge um, multi-person, multi-orchestral arrangement like that. A couple things. It's no longer Od Shana Khalfa. You may have seen at the beginning. It was Od Sha'a Khalfa. Another hour has passed, right? Talking about we don't have that kind of time. in conventional terms. It's every hour we're thinking about them returning home because this is about, right, those kidnapped on October 7th. Um, what someone else pointed out to me once when teaching this specific song, it really looked like that line where she says, "Mitpaleret lishlomcha," right? I'm praying for your well-being. It looked like they were praying. You heard different voices, you saw people wearing different things, you saw them even doing things with their hands that indicated prayer, right? Because we know music and prayer are often intertwined. Um, it's a very powerful version. It's the reason why it got so many hits. I also want you to listen again to the beginning of it because there's another little clue about how Israeli this arrangement is. By the way, if you didn't catch that in the middle, that was the first few bars of Hatikva, Israel's national anthem, on purpose, obviously tying it into something much larger, where how integral Habayta is in this story. I want you to listen again to the beginning of it, and then I'm going to share with you another clip. Um, right, right. That's the beginning of it. Now listen to this. True, they're both using trumpets. They're both using similar orchestral arrangements. But for a native Israeli ear, that beginning of this orchestral version of Habaita sounds a lot like what you just heard. What you just heard is the theme music to a documentary series called Amud Ha'esh, Pillar of Fire. Amud Ha'esh also came out around the same time as Habaita and was the first documentary entailing the history of Zionism and the founding of the State of Israel. It was such an important um, television moment in Israeli society. Think of it equivalent to in America, the equivalent of Roots, right? Around the same time, the 70s and 80s, people were fervently watched the series because it told the story of the United States, albeit from um, the viewpoint of slavery. Amud Daesh is the first time we see on Israeli TV the history building the state of Israel. And that music is so ingrained in Israeli society. It's actually used to this day for the official Yom HaShoah ceremony, the official Holocaust Memorial Day ceremony at Yad Vashem every year. That music indicates something serious, something that touches our very essence. So that the beginning bars of Habayta, this orchestral version, sound similar instrument-wise, however you want to think about it, is also meant to draw on that. Just like Hatikva in the middle of it is meant to draw in. There's something much larger going on here in this story that's not just about necessarily just Habayta, coming home. There's something more about it. What that something is, you're going to be able to talk about in your groups on Cafe Oleh Conversation on Wednesday, right? So this week, you're going to talk about what you heard today, the words to the lyrics, the music, the differences in the versions, and you're going to have conversation prompts, regardless of what level you're at, because that's how we work at Cafe Oleh Conversations. We break you up on Wednesdays, 8 p.m. You're on Israel time on Zoom into groups based on your proficiency level, and you'll have conversation prompts to talk about the song you just heard, the different versions, and if there's time to even bring in some other songs that you think of, especially maybe over the last 2.5 years, maybe in general that you really like. Okay. So that's going to be Wednesday's class, but obviously you will get a copy both of the lyrics, the words, but also the word Habayta and these two versions. So you'll be able to hear what you think of these and obviously share them. Because again, this is a song that has touched us since the early 1980s, continually plays a role. And it reverberates across a lot of different parts of Israeli identity, as you saw. A little bit of Hatikva in the middle of the this version, an allusion perhaps to Amud Ha'esh, um, various people of all different backgrounds performing together in an ancient part of Israel. A lot going on in one clip in one song, but that is very much emblematic of Israeli society. Before I get to questions, again, a reminder to please join us for Cafe Oleh conversations, whether it's your first time, whether you've joined us in the past, Wednesday at 8, also free. You can sign up through the Nefesh B'Nefesh website as well as through the emails. And I am about to take questions. If you wrote them in the Q&A, that's where I'll be looking. I just want to tell you about next week's class. Let me just pull up our schedule. So next week we get back down to business, and we're literally getting back down to business. Next week is a topic I cover all the time when I'm not on Cafe Olé, which is interviewing and networking. My background and my business is in cross-cultural communications, and a lot of what I do is training people in how to market themselves and how to network themselves. So, based on your request, we are going to do for the first time about networking and interviewing here in Israel. Nefesh B'Nefesh has lots of great resources on the subject, and they have lots of practice and lots of things like that. I'm going to teach you how to do it in Hebrew. And if you're saying to me, well, Jay, I don't work anymore, I'm retired. Good for you. You probably know someone who could use this, right? As we say in Hebrew, chaver mevi chaver. A friend brings a friend along, or the buddy system, meaning maybe you know someone who could learn what an elevator pitch is. If you don't know, by the way, in English, you're going to learn what it is in Hebrew, and learn how to do it themselves. Maybe they're going to want to learn some magic words to use when you interview for in Israel, right? The point, though, is you probably know someone who could use this. This is a great time to share Cafe au Lait with a much larger audience than just yourselves, as exciting as it is. We have more than 300 people attending today's class, right? So next week, interviewing and networking. Hope you will join us, even if it's not relevant to you. To be able to talk about yourself and who you are in modern Hebrew is all about next week. Doesn't matter if you're looking for a job or not. It's all about how you present yourself next week. Let me get to some questions. Okay, I see someone really interested in talking about politics. I really promise you we're going to do it in the near future. As I made Aliyah, people ask me why. I answer Habayta, meaning I'm home. Is this wrong? Should I add ani? I'm telling people asking to go home, right? Habayta means going home or homewards. And that's why the word was chosen as the word of the year of people coming home. So yes, you can answer in Hebrew why, and you can say Habayta, because I'm coming home, right? It's not literal. You're being poetic, you're being artistic, just like these songs were and these adaptations were. Um, if you want to answer literally, because this is my home, ki ze habayit sheli, because ki ze, this, habayit, is the house, sheli, of mine. Right? How would you say her house? Habayit shela. Habayta is direction. Okay. Someone's asking her house as in if you added the possessive suffix at the end, it would be beta. Habayta, beta. Habayta, homeward. Beta, her house. Okay. What in Hebrew is difference between house of prayer and house of prayer? We have a whole class on smichut, on compound nouns. Please look at our YouTube lessons because we've covered this actually several times. But the way this works in compound nouns, if I want to say a synagogue, Beit Knesset. If I want to say the synagogue, Beit HaKnesset. Okay, that's the easiest and most straightforward way to explain that. Um, I went to the bank at 12:30. Let me come back to that one. First answer questions about specifically here. I know this will come up in Wednesday. How does one say live music versus recorded music? Both of these are literal translations, so I let you look them up. They are not idiomatic expressions, so you don't need me for that. Okay. People who are asking if I'm going to send the links, you clearly don't remember me, or this is your first time. Of course, I'm sending you the links, folks. Besides that, you can find them on your own. Of course, I'm sending you everything we went over, all the different music, all the different links, and of course, the lyrics themselves. Okay. Okay. A question not about today's class, but happy to answer that. I went to the bank at 12:30 because I was told to come afternoon. It turns out this did not mean afternoon as I understand it in English. It meant that after the bank closed at 1 and reopens at 4. So came back after 4. Three other customers all knew this, but it was unexpected for me. Are there other time references in modern Hebrew like this that aren't literal? Um, well, first off, always look at bank hours both on apps like Google Maps or on the website, but also if it's a bank that you're physically going in, it will have the times outside. Many places like banks, like healthcare clinics will close for a couple hours in the middle of the day, several days a week. Think of it like a siesta in certain European countries. It won't be open all day. Okay, that is definitely a cultural difference here in Israel. Some banks will open at very random hours, so it's always best to check in advance. Um, but yes, afternoon is thought of more in Hebrew. Acharei hatzoraim is not a literal time; it is a period of time. Okay, Acharei hatzoraim is a general period. They would tell you if you needed to come at 12:30, they would say 12 v'chetzi or after a specific hour, אחרי 12, after 12, right? But if they're saying to you אחרי הצהריים, which simply means afternoon, it's a period of time, it's not a specific time. I understand the difference in thinking. Also, that why would you have hours off in the middle of the day? But those are definite differences. Okay. Okay. With that, we are running out of time. So first off, Toda Rabah, thank you all for joining. Like I said, this recording will be up in the next day or two, along with attachments with the words, the lyrics, and so forth. I unfortunately saw that some people devolved into some partisan political talk in the chat. That is not the place here at Cafe Oleh for that. I hope you were able to have a civil conversation because whatever you think of the last 2.5 years, we have covered it a lot in many different ways. This is a piece of Israeli society and Israeli culture, whether you liked it or not. It is a part of who we are as a larger, very diverse population. And being a part of the people of Israel, the nation of Israel, the state of Israel requires a complexity and a diversity of views and opinions. It doesn't mean you have to like it all, but you do at least have to recognize they exist. With that, toda rabah. I hope to see many of you on Wednesday for the Cafe Oleh conversations, where we'll talk more about the lyrics. Until then, toda rabah and lehitraot. Take care.